Hey friends, I I had a pretty powerful experience today, and if you've been watching my posts, I've kept you abreast of some changes, some movement that's been happening as a result of a wrist injury that I had that I sustained in early July. So we're coming up on 3 months ago. Been getting some treatment for that from an osteopath, and one of the things that's been showing up is that he'll move something in the body. And we're talking about literally like wrist bones moving that have been frozen in place for decades. Literally, this is an injury. I sort of got an injury over the top of an old entrenched pattern, and the pattern has been there, or this sort of frozenness of my wrist bones has been that way for I don't, it's hard to know, but probably since I was in my teens. And I'm in my mid, cresting into late 40s now, so 30 years, maybe a little less, but probably about that. And so the osteopath would move a bone, get some kind of release in there, and I noticed like clockwork, after about the second session, I started noticing this is opening up emotional and psychological patterns in me that have been around about that long. And it was I had a session today with a therapist, just my talk therapist, and my wife, that really went to a new level in terms of it's funny because it's like on some level I was very aware of, intellectually aware of some of the trauma that I've sustained as a young person, but being intellectual, the fact that I could recall the events and loosely understand in a kind of on the intellectual level that they were probably traumatic imprinting events does not mean that I was truly in touch with what they were doing to me. I had to go back. I did a post a few days ago called Regression in Service of the Ego, and man, was it appropriate, because my therapist today was like, that's what you're doing when you go back there. You're regressing. Regression in service of the ego is basically the practice of consciously going back, usually in under guided, sort of controlled circumstances to a phase of life when a traumatic imprinting event might have taken place, and essentially reliving it or reintegrating it, going back with the intention of now being more capable of holding space for it and integrating it into our system so that it doesn't stay a kind of locked subconscious block, which is what I had in my wrist. And my therapist today said something really powerful. He said, there's a kind of old adage in psychosomatic work, which basically says the body keeps score. And I was like, well, that sounds about right. That sounds about right. And I was able to feel some things. I was able to I think, release some things that are, it's old shit. And I was struck, I had been saying on this post that I would have the osteopath do a treatment and he would move something. And then I described it as having an emotional kind of fallout experience, like an emotional I don't know, like emotional expression, an emotional wave would hit me. And I realized that's not actually fully accurate. Not only that's true, I did go back and experience the emotions that were, potentially, again, this is kind of, I can't say any of this too definitively, but I'll speak from and about my experience. My experience is that I'm going back to the emotional experiences that were my primary experiences or my significant experiences at the time when I sustained this injury, and they were instrumental in producing that kind of compacted thing in my body where the body kept score. There was an emotional experience that I couldn't handle, or some kind of life circumstance that I just couldn't deal with. And so I would punch a wall or do something, I was never violent against other people, but like I did all kinds of kind of enraged teenager type things. But that didn't really help me cope. It might have vented my immediate sense of, enraged disempowerment, but it didn't actually help me integrate the experience. It just drove it into a physical injury where it could live in me until a later date, like a message in a bottle from younger me. I'm opening these messages in a bottle from younger me, and they're I had a lot to say. I had a lot to talk about. A younger me has a lot to talk about with older me. I've thought often about going back and speaking to younger me as older, wiser me, and being able to guide me through some of those experiences. Well, now I have the sense that that's kind of what's happening, because younger me is not gone. Younger me is still in here looking to be guided. Actually, the younger me still needs those answers. It's not that unless we've done the work to like unpack all this stuff and fully integrate it, then younger me is still active. And so it's actually a real opportunity. I can go in and talk to that part of myself. I don't need a time machine. But what I was getting around to saying is that it's not just an emotional experience. When we release something like that in our body, we also recreate or create circumstances in our here and now life that produce the previously pent up emotions that now are finding expression. It's remarkable. I mean, that is like some serious, the whole world is a product of our minds type shit. Because and you know, and it's I don't even know, you know, I'm sure there are people who can be conscious of this and who probably could, you know, if you're conscious enough, you might actually not produce those circumstances. You might be able to head them off at the pass, and before your subconscious just goes and creates a circumstance to produce so that we can relive those emotions, you might be able to, you know, stop short of doing that. But honestly, I don't even know that that's necessary. I don't even know that that's a bad thing. In a weird way, it's like that is the deeper healing. Producing those circumstances and then right now, in the here and now, being like, and I'm okay in these circumstances. I'm feeling the deep, dark, seemingly life-threatening shit that I'm convinced, some part of me at least, is convinced will destroy me. But I'm okay. And it's that last bit that is really the key. Not so when those circumstances arise now, in our current lives and our current state of consciousness, we no longer have to react by taking those circumstances at face value and sort of going into combat with them, going to war against that reality. We can actually, and this is what I felt myself doing with, I would say, reasonable success, especially considering the intensity of what has been coming up. I've been able to just, it's like the only thing, I just know that the only thing I need to not do is lash out against the people or the circumstances that seem to be producing this emotional response in me right now. Because if I lash out, or if I resist, if I passive aggressively evade any degree of dodging the bullet, is actually a subconscious affirmation that those circumstances are reality and that those circumstances are a threat. It's a subconscious affirmation to myself that those circumstances are a threat. I need to say that again. When we rebel against or resist or go to war against circumstances that are basically reproducing trapped energy, trapped emotion, trapped trauma, if those circumstances arise now and we go to war against them, we're actually subconsciously telling ourselves that trauma is real and you're not over it, so you have to battle this, as opposed to being able to say that trauma, I am something beyond that trauma, like genuine transcendence, genuine movement of my identity to a level where it's not that trauma didn't happen, it's not that maybe it wasn't even painful, it's just that it's not overwhelming anymore. It's not an all-consuming trauma anymore. It's something that I can perceive. I don't have to enjoy it, but I can tolerate it and I can integrate it. And it's funny because I'm saying this right now out loud, and this is kind of maybe the first time actually that I've really clocked why this particular process is so important and why I think it's so effective. But that's really what it comes down to. We want to integrate our past trauma. We don't want it to be lodged in places in our body. I mean, it is, and there's undoubtedly some stuff left in my body, but But being willing to let that go and being willing to it's like David Hawkins says in Letting Go. He says you don't want to express the emotion because that's just venting it. That's basically, again, affirming the reality of the overwhelm, venting the amount that we can't repress, and then repressing the rest. We don't want to repress because then it just goes underground and waits for another opportunity to come up. What we want to do is experience. Sit in the experience and be in the center of the experience without needing to project it onto a surface of circumstance or a surface of a relationship. Which is very, very tempting. We want to do that. We want to project it onto a circumstance or a person, someone else, usually the people who are nearby, our loved ones, so that our minds cannot feel irrational, so that our minds can say, I'm feeling this because of that person, or I'm feeling this because of that circumstance. Not, I'm feeling this because of a deep and unexamined trauma that's coming up from my subconscious and is lodged in my body in ways that I have no rational access to, but that are overwhelming in the moment. That's what we actually want to say to ourselves, because that's what's happening. That's true. And man, it is not a game of being perfect. It's a game of being as conscious as we can. And when we fall off the horse, getting back on the horse. And when we make a mistake or, lash out, apologizing and coming and starting again, trying again. There's no other way, I don't think, to get through deep trauma. There's no other way. You got to keep taking responsibility, knowing that we will probably do that imperfectly, and then when we recognize where we've gone wrong, do whatever we got to do to start again, to do it again. Little by little, it does unravel. I am somehow at my age, I'm unraveling trauma that's probably 30 years old. That's good news. The fact that that's possible is really good news. There's basically no limit. You could be as old as you want and do this work. There's no barrier. There might be things that feel like barriers. Certainly a couple hours ago before my appointment today, I felt like there was a barrier. I was like, I don't know if I'm ever going to get through this. That was a thought in my head. I don't know if I'm ever going to get through this. I don't know if this is ever going to change. It's hopeless. It's a feeling of like, oh. But somehow even that feeling of hopelessness, that feeling of despair is necessary. It's part, if that's what the experience entailed, then that's part of what we need to feel and actually accept and not deny, not deflect, not project, not transfer onto something else. And then little by little, we get to feel it, gets to come through us. We get to make it conscious. We get to integrate it. It's deep work. It's deep work. So yeah, that's where I'm at today. Thanks for watching, folks. I love comments. Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate you. Hope to see you again.